Today we're privileged to have an opportunity. I know that all of us in social studies right now, we just wrapped up the judicial branch. And today we're fortunate to have a judge here who's going to speak with us. And let me just talk to you all a little bit about Judge Wood. Judge Marie Wood is a graduate of Spelman College. While there, she earned her Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics. She then earned a Juris Doctorate from the University of Tennessee College of Law. For nearly 2 decades, she has been an associate at the law firm of Burroughs and King, and now Wood and Wood, and currently is the first female as well as African American juvenile court judge of Rockdale County. In 2013, she earned her certification as a child welfare law specialist. Currently, right now, there are only 76 of those people throughout our entire state, so that's quite an accomplishment. Judge Wood has a long history of leadership in Rockdale County. Since taking the bench in 2016, Judge Wood has expanded the Rockdale County Juvenile Court Program by offering and implementing 2 additional accountability courts. One is the Family Treatment Court and the Mental Health Resource Court. She's also revamped the court's CHIN's protocol CHINs and started the Project Close Girls Group. Additionally, and I think we all should remember this when we had Representative Taylor here, she also works with the Youth Impact Center, formerly known as the Evening Reporting Center, which now houses a day program and provides supervision to students who have been suspended, as well as educational instruction to suspended and expelled youth. She also offers, or that program also offers, an evening program that offers supervision, life skills, and tutoring. Judge Wood is a dedicated member of Rockdale County, and she has dedicated herself to helping Rockdale County youth. She engages the community through a lot of stakeholder meetings, speaking engagements, as well as community events. In 2024, Judge Wood is seeking to become the Superior Court Judge of Rockdale County, so we wish her the best in that election process. So at this particular time, I will introduce to you all Judge Maureen Wood, Juvenile Court Judge of Rockdale County.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Good afternoon. Very happy to be here to talk to you all this evening. I'm really excited about the questions that you have. I want to make sure that I answer all of those and leave some time also just in case you have follow-up questions for us. Mr. Hunter did a great job of reading my bio and explaining who I am. I want to tell you a little bit more about what I do in the juvenile court, and then I'll give you a little bit of insight on what it takes to become a judge. The juvenile court is a court that handles cases concerning young people, right? So anyone who has committed a crime, right, who's broken the law, if they are under the age of 17, then they would be in the juvenile court jurisdiction. So for example, when an adult commits a crime, 911 is called, law enforcement comes out, immediately they get arrested, right? And then they'll have charges filed against them and they will have to go through the adult system. Well, for someone under the age of 17, if you break the law, same type of process will happen, except instead of going through the adult system, you will come through the juvenile court system. So I handle all cases concerning crimes. They could be crimes that are misdemeanors, or they could be crimes that are felony crimes. So misdemeanors are things that are punishable by less than 12 months on probation or having to do certain programs or punishment. And then felony cases are cases that are punishable by more than a year or more than a fine of $1,000. So those are your more serious offenses. They can range from anything from robbery, to burglary, to aggravated assault, child molestation, all the things that you would see in the adult court system, we see in the juvenile court system. The offenders are just under the age of 17. Additionally, the juvenile court, I have jurisdiction for cases concerning children who have been alleged to have been abused or neglected by their parents. And so in those cases, I am the person that makes the decision as to whether or not a child comes into foster care. And so in those cases, if I have to make the decision to remove a child from their home and place them in foster care, I also have to give that parent the opportunity to fix whatever the neglect issues are so that the family can be reunited. In those cases where the parent is not able to fix the neglect issues, then I have to make the decision to terminate parental rights. And what that means is that parent can no longer be the parent to that child, and that child will be up for adoption. So I hear some very serious cases. There are other cases that I hear that are very unique just to the juvenile court, and those are cases called CHINS cases, Children in Need of Services. The interesting thing about CHINS cases is they only affect young people. So I'll give you a couple of examples. They're status offenses. What status means is the only reason it's against the law is because you're not an adult yet. For example, if as an adult I decided to run away from home, nobody's gonna ask that I be locked up and brought to court when I'm found, right? People may call 911 and say, hey, Maureen ran away from home, can you help us find her? But when you find me, you're not gonna take me to court. Well, for CHINS cases, those runaway cases, I handle those in the juvenile court. The other example would be truancy. So if I decided as an adult I'm not going to work, what's gonna happen? I'll get fired. Somebody said that, right? But nobody's gonna take me to work. Nobody's gonna take me to court because I didn't go to work. Well, for young people, if you choose not to go to school, that is a truancy charge, and that is something that you could come under the juvenile court jurisdiction for. Other examples would be things like underage drinking or driving without having a license, those types of things. So that is the gist of what I do in the juvenile court. There are other cases that I hear that are transferred from other courts. Juvenile court is the only court that has jurisdiction to hear cases from Superior Court. So Superior Court can transfer modification of custody, child support, visitation cases. Superior Court can transfer a legitimation case to me. So those are things that may start in Superior Court, but they may decide to send to me in the juvenile court. I also have jurisdiction to hear cases that have been transferred from probate court. For example, oftentimes grandparents, aunts, uncles sometimes get guardianship of children, and then the parent wants to decide that they don't want that person to have guardianship anymore, and then the grandparent says, well, I'll get to keep guardianship. When those cases, if there's a dispute between the grandparent and the parent, those cases may start in probate court, and probate court may decide to transfer those to me as well. The next thing I want to tell you about before I start answering your questions is what it takes to be a judge. So first, to be a judge, you have to be a lawyer first in the state of Georgia. And let me back up. Depending on where you live, you do not have to be a lawyer to be a probate judge, and you do not have to be a lawyer to be a magistrate judge. So if your population falls under 100,000 people, then you do not have to be a lawyer to be a probate judge, and you do not have to be a lawyer to be a magistrate judge. But for all the other judges, you have to be a lawyer, right? And so Rockdale County, we are right under, I think we have around 94,000 people. So in our county, you don't have to be a lawyer to be a probate judge or a magistrate judge. But you should know that in Rockdale County, both of our probate and magistrate court judges and the associate judges, they're all lawyers. You have to be a lawyer first. In order to be a lawyer, you have to go to college and get a 4-year degree. Once you get that 4-year degree, you have to take a test called the bar examination. That is a test that takes a couple of days to take. One day is all multiple choice, another day is all essays, and another day is they'll have you do things like maybe write out a will or write out, practical stuff, right? And so after that 3-day test, if you pass, then you will be able to be eligible to become a lawyer. The other thing that you have to do to become a lawyer is they have to look into your background. So you have to be very honest about your background. And they'll have to decide whether or not you're fit morally. Everyone knows what moral means, right? Like whether or not you're someone that can be trusted. And so they look into your background. So you could graduate from law school, you can take the bar examination, they can still tell you can't be a lawyer because they say you're shady or you're you have all this stuff in your background. So that's the other piece that sometimes they don't tell you about. I think nurses, that profession is like that too. Like you can do everything, but they may still not let you be a nurse if you don't pass that background type check situation. Once you become a lawyer in the state of Georgia, you have to be practicing law for at least 5 years, and you have to be at least 30 years old to be able to be a judge. One thing that you should know, and I'm sure you're studying in your classes, is that every state has different laws, right? You have state laws and you have federal laws. Well, what we do in the juvenile court, in all of our state courses, we follow the Georgia state laws. So when you study to be a lawyer and take that bar examination is for the state of Georgia. That doesn't mean that you can go and practice in Tennessee without taking their bar examination or without getting permission. So it's a little bit different than, for example, medicine. Once you become a medical doctor, you can pretty much practice in every state. You can be a doctor in every state. So that is pretty much it for what I do and how you become a judge. I want to go into some of your questions now. I think it's really, really exciting to be able to look at the things that you guys are learning in the book and actually be able to see somebody that's actually doing it, right? So I understand that you all have learned about the 3 different branches of government. Can somebody, what are they again? Executive, legislative, and judicial. And so obviously I'm the judge, so I'm which branch? Judicial branch. Okay, very good. So one of the things you have to be about to do and be able to do is to be fair and impartial, right? Impartial means to be fair, like you don't lean towards one side or the other. So your first question is, how difficult is it to stay impartial in some of the most difficult legal and criminal situations? So one thing that's very different from the juvenile court bench, from the state and superior court bench, is the fact that, well, let me back up. As an adult, if you were to be accused of committing a crime, you are presumed innocent until proven guilty in trial, right? Did you guys learn that?
Yes.
Yeah. So what that means is, jump. The expectation is when you come into court is that you're an innocent person, and the prosecutor has to prove that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Whether that's a misdemeanor offense or a felony offense, that's the standard. Everyone has a right to have a trial, and everyone has a right to have a fair trial. One thing that you may not know, a lot of people don't know, is in juvenile court, you do not have the right to have a jury trial. Does everyone know what a jury is? A jury is when members, and you have to be registered to vote to be called on a jury. Typically, that's where they get the names from. But a jury trial in Superior Court is going to be 12 people who get called randomly to come and serve on the jury and hear the case and make the decision as to whether you're guilty or innocent, okay? And so, obviously, you would rather have 12 people make that decision than one judge, right? Does that make sense? Like, if you're looking at what your shots are in terms of being not guilty, it would make more sense to have a jury, like 12 people. Somebody might think you're innocent versus have one. But one of the things about juvenile court is there is no jury. Juvenile court, the judge is the jury and the person that makes the decision. So that's a major difference. It is difficult sometimes to stay impartial, especially in those cases where you have seen somebody come before you multiple times, right? So let's say somebody has a charge of like shoplifting, right? Let's say the charge was that they stole something, and they are adamant that they're not guilty, and they want to have a trial. Well, if you're the only judge, and they've literally been found guilty of shoplifting 4 times before that, right? When they come before you, it's really hard for you to say, okay, I'm just going to pretend like I don't know that they were guilty of shoplifting 4 times before. Thank you so much. So that's an example of how it might be hard to stay impartial, because as a judge, you're not supposed to look at somebody's past. You're not supposed to look at something that has nothing to do with the case. You're supposed to look at just the case. You're supposed to look at just what the lawyers present. You can't take outside information that you know and try to put it into that case. So sometimes it can be hard because judges are human, we're not robots. The second question, how does the judicial branch of Georgia fulfill its duty in interpreting the laws of Georgia? Very good. So that's not necessarily a juvenile court specific question. There's two types of law. One is your statutory law, that's the law that's in the books, right? And then there's something called case law. And your case law is law that is created by judges who have had to take the law that's in the books and interpret it for certain situations. Obviously, the law could be, I don't know, don't jaywalk. Y'all know what jaywalk is, right? Like, don't jaywalk. That could be the law, right? Well, you could have, that's very black and white. But what if you have a situation where somebody did something that, like, it could be argued that it's jaywalking, but then again, it could be argued that it's not jaywalking, right? And so someone has to go to trial and say, well, this is why this is not jaywalking, or this is why this is jaywalking. And then that judge would make a decision based on the facts in that case and create case law that says, hey, in a circumstance like this, then this is jaywalking, or in a circumstance like this isn't jaywalking. So you have the law that's in the books, and then you have the law that is created by the judges when they have to interpret the law for situations that are not black and white. Did that make sense? Yes or no? Yeah, okay. So the judicial branch fulfills its duty in interpreting the laws by taking what the actual law is in the book and applying that to the facts of the case. Anytime the law that's in the book is not, and the facts of the case are not so black and white, then the judge has the ability to interpret the law and make it fit those set of facts. Sometimes the judges are right, sometimes the judges are wrong. But there's always checks and balances. So let's say a judge is wrong when they interpret it, right? And the person says, well, I think that judge is wrong. What do you think that they can do? Appeal, right? So appeal means that basically I want a second opinion, right? I want somebody else to look at your decision. And so there is a process where even the judge's decision in interpreting the law can be appealed to another, usually a set of judges. It could be an appellate court, like the Court of Appeals or your Supreme Court, and then they would say, hey, Judge Miller, you were wrong about that. And so then they would overturn whatever the ruling that I have is, and then they would create a law that way. So you know that your legislators create the law that goes into the books, right? And then you have circumstances that happen, and then someone will take someone to court and say, hey, Judge, I want you to interpret the law based on these circumstances that happen. And then the judge may actually end up creating a law in that case that otherwise isn't necessarily in the books because it fit that set of facts. So we're not legislators, but we do have the job of interpreting the law, and while we interpret the law, sometimes we create case law that helps guide other judges and lawyers' opinions about how certain situations should go. What happens in court during the pre-trial process? So, if you've ever been to court before, a lot of times people have lawyers that represent them. And so the lawyers will say, hey, before we spend all this time in this trial, Judge, can we meet with you and go over the facts of the case? And so the judge might say, sure, come on in my office. And the judge can do that as long as all the parties that are represented are present. So as long as both the lawyers are there, then we can come into the judge's office and have a pretrial. And those lawyers will say, hey, these are the facts of the case. When we have trial, this is what I'm going to show. This is what my witnesses are going to say. And this is why I should win. And you should rule X, Y, and Z. And then the other lawyer would say, well, Judge, this is what I'm going to put up. And this is what I think is going to happen in trial. And these are the witnesses that I have. And X, Y, and Z. And then, so Judge, if things go that way, what do you think you're going to do? How do you think you're going to rule? And oftentimes the judge will say, oh, well, if the witnesses say that, or if that's going to happen, then this is probably how I'm going to rule. And so those lawyers can go back to their clients and say, hey, I know you want to have a trial, but we just had the pretrial and we talked to the judge, and the judge said if everything goes this way, this is how they're going to rule. Do you want us to reach an agreement like that, or do you want to still have a trial? Sometimes people say, well, I'm fine with that, let's just reach an agreement that way. And sometimes they say, no, let's still have a trial. That's an example of a pretrial, right? So a pretrial is what happens before the trial, either to settle the whole case, or sometimes it's just to narrow down so the trial doesn't take so long. For example, a pretrial might be, the purpose of the pretrial might be to say, oh, Maureen is a lawyer and she has 10 witnesses. And then lawyer Hunter, he has 20 witnesses. And so we think it's gonna take us 2 weeks to try this case. Let's have a pretrial. When we get down in the pretrial, we realize that half of lawyer Hunter's witnesses are the same as my witnesses. Or realize that half of my witnesses are out of town. Or somebody died, or whatever the case may be. And we can say, okay, we'll cross this witness off, or oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna call this first, or let's just not do this, or let's just not do that. The whole purpose is to try your best before the trial, which is why it's called pre-trial, to narrow down the issues so that trial doesn't take all day. And so that you don't also waste the jury's time for those cases that have a jury. What happens during arraignment? Okay, so anytime someone is accused of a crime, there is a process where they will be formally charged with the crime, okay? And when they are formally charged with the crime, there's a process called the arraignment. The arraignment is when you get a court date and you come before the judge, and the judge says, Maureen, you've been charged with a misdemeanor. Do you understand that? And then Maureen says, yes, I understand that I've been charged with a misdemeanor. And then the judge will say, well, do you understand that you have a right to have a trial? Yes. Do you understand that you have a right to call witnesses? Yes. Do you understand that you have a right to testify yourself? Yes. Do you understand that Attorney Hunter is your attorney? Yes. Have you had the opportunity to talk to your attorney about this case? Do you fully understand what the consequences are? Yes. Okay. Are you on any drugs right now? No. Is there anything wrong with you mentally? Can you make the decision right now if you decide to admit or deny the charges? Yes. Do you admit or deny the charges? Sometimes people say, I deny the charges, I'm not guilty, I want to go to trial. Sometimes people in arraignment say, you know what, I admit, I did it, I just want this to be over with, right? And so that's what the arraignment process is that's the formal process where you come in before the court and you say either I'm guilty or I'm not guilty, I understand what my rights are, I have a lawyer representing me, I fully understand what the consequences are, I'm not on any drugs, I can make decisions for myself right now. That's really what the arraignment process is. What is the role and the duty of a child welfare law specialist? So, child welfare law certification is a certification through the American Bar Association and the National Association of Counsel for Children. It is basically an extra test that you take to show that you're an expert in a certain field. And so for child welfare law, that you are an expert in the child welfare law field. You cannot just take the test, you have to apply to take the test. The way that you apply to take the test is you show basically how long you've been practicing law, you show how long you've been practicing juvenile law, and you have to get references from people that have actually watched you practice, and they have to say whether or not you're good at what you do. They basically rate you and they recommend whether or not you should be eligible to take the test. And so your application, you give them a writing sample of things that you've written in the past. You give them your background, your resume, what you've been doing with those recommendations, and certify that you've been practicing for at least 3 years. And then a committee decides whether or not you can take the test. And if they decide, yeah, she's got the qualifications, and these people say that she's really good at what she does, we're going to let her take the test. And then the next part is to study to take the test. And the test takes about a day to take. If you pass the test, then you will be certified as a child welfare law specialist. And then every 3 years, you have to submit for recertification. And you have to show that you've got the training, you've got to show that people still think you're decent at child welfare law. And then the same committee will look over to say whether or not you can continue on that path of being a specialist. What is the general yearly salary for a judge? It depends on what type of judge and where. So, for example, the salaries in Rockdale County for judges range from anywhere between $103,000 to maybe close to $190,000. But if you look at some of the other counties, so most of the judicial salaries have a piece that comes from the state of the money and a piece that comes from the county of the money. So if the piece that comes from the county is more, then obviously the salary would be more. So for example, some of the judges in Augusta and Cobb County have a really big county supplement. So whereas the ceiling in Rockdale may be 190, the ceiling in Augusta or Cobb may be 240. So it's a range. Same thing, the juvenile court judges, some of them in South Georgia, up until recently, the low end of the salary was around $60,000, right? So that's a big difference to be in South Georgia and earn $60,000 and to be up in North Georgia and earn $200,000 and you're doing the exact same job, right? A lot of that has to do with where you are, what county you are, and what the resources of your county are for that extra supplement. So it really just depends. For your state judges, for example, like your Supreme Court judge and your appellate court judge, their salaries are set by the state, and right now they're around $200,000. But I will tell you that this legislative session, I think that they are looking at the Superior Court, Superior Court, Supreme Court, and Appellate Court salaries. So they may pass a law in the legislature, which is the legislative branch, right? Pass a law, and they are responsible for the state budget, correct? And so when they pass that law, they may make the salaries go up for those positions. Have you ever wanted to be another judge, such as an appellate, probate, or magistrate judge? So I've been a juvenile court judge for the last 7 years, and I'm going to be honest with you, I was doing a lot of work, working on the programs that we have in the juvenile court and the things that we offer and making sure that I was doing a really good job there. I really wasn't thinking about another position until about a year ago. And what made me start thinking about another position is that I realized that one of the current Superior Court judges is going to retire. And so the Superior Court is a position that typically people either retire or die right from. And so it's not like every 4 years you see somebody new running for that position. And so about a year ago, I really started to look at well, who's gonna fill that seat and what will they do in that seat. And so I know the type of impact that I can make in our community, and that's one of the reasons why I decided about a year ago that I think it would be good for me to run. So I am interested in the Superior Court, but I love what I do in the Juvenile Court. Do you think Georgia's juvenile justice process is working? Ooh. I think some parts of it is working, and I think that some other parts, there's a lot more work to do. I think that all of the intentions and the way that the laws were written were for young people to have the opportunity to transform their lives. And so for that part, yes, I think that the intention is great. I don't think everything is working the way it's supposed to, and I think there's room for improvement. Last question. Besides dealing with the age difference when you become a Superior Court judge, what will be your primary duties? So in Superior Court, we handle all domestic relation matters. That would be your divorce matters, your child support matters, your child custody matters. Also, Superior Court handles adoption matters. Superior Court handles matters that concern title to land. Superior Court handles all felony criminal cases. And also anything that's a ruling in equity that there's not actually a law on the books for, Superior Court handles that. So a lot of those things I already handle in juvenile court, but just for young people. So it really wouldn't be a huge leap for me to do Superior Court because a lot of that stuff I already do. So those are all the questions, and I know we said we had about 5 minutes left. So does anyone for the next 5 minutes have any questions for me that I didn't answer on your sheet? Sure. Yes. Oh gosh. Ooh, and this is being recorded, right? So I was a lawyer for over 10 years, and I took on a lot of clients that had a lot of different issues, mainly family law issues. One of my clients had a child who had gotten in trouble in Rockdale. And so they asked me to represent their child in that court. And I live in Rockdale, I've raised my children in Rockdale, this is my community, and it's really important to me that all of our courts, all of our judicial officials are doing a good job for the people. And I went in there and I was really disappointed by the way the child was treated, and if we're being honest, the way I was treated at the time as well. And it really made me feel like, we could do better for Rockdale County. So I wasn't necessarily looking to become the judge, but I had the experience and I knew how things really needed to be working for the people in the community. And that's kind of what made me say, well, instead of complaining about it, maybe I need to step up. And so that's kind of how I ended up here. Any other questions?
Since you were a lawyer first, would you go back to being a lawyer?
Yes, I'm always a lawyer. I'm always going to be a lawyer. Now, because I'm a full-time judge, I can't like take on cases or give any legal advice right now. But I'll always be a lawyer, so if ever I decided I didn't want to be a judge anymore, I could go and start, picking up cases and continue what I was doing before I started. Did I pay for what now?
Can you pay somebody to win the case?
Like pay the lawyer to win the case? I don't understand that question. All right. Is that it?
All right, any other questions? Any other questions from Judge Wood?
Who, me? Currently, my salary, I think, is around $148,000.
I know. They are. That girl's behind me.